All right, hi everyone. So this is the next video in our Unit 3 review, and we are going to be talking about the families of the periodic table. So remember that a family or a group, okay, so some vocabulary. So if you have a family or group, we're talking about a column, okay, and columns are vertical. They go up and down on the periodic table. If we're talking about a period, that is the same as a row. And remember, rows are horizontal. They go side to side. Okay, so each of our families, okay, are groups on the periodic table, and they have similar properties. Okay, so families behave similarly. So families have similar chemical and physical properties. Okay, just like how I have a brother and sister, and while we're each different people, we have similar behaviors or mannerisms simply because we grew up in the same house and in the same family. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to first identify where these are. So the first family we're going to talk about are the alkali metals. Okay, the alkali metals are located in group 1 or column 1, okay, and they are extremely reactive. So underneath our periodic table, we'll just kind of write the things that you need to know about each one. So the alkali metals are the most reactive metals on the periodic table. Okay, they're the most reactive metals. We know that they are in column number 1, okay, or group number 1, and that means that they have one valence electron. They will always have a positive 1 charge, okay, and the last thing that you need to know is that they are highly explosive with water. Okay, they catch on fire, they blow it up. It's really intense. Okay, so this is what you've got going on for your alkali metals. Now, the second family that we want to talk about are similar. They're in column number 2. Oh, let me decrease the size of that pen. Okay, so they're in column number 2, and they have a similar name, but it's the alkaline earth metals. Okay, so we have the alkaline earth metals. So with the alkaline earth metals, there's not too much that you really need to know about them. They're metals. They're in group number 2. They have 2 valence electrons, and they always form a positive 2 charge. Okay, but that's honestly about it. Because they're metals, in our next video, we'll talk about the general characteristics and properties of metals. But they are less reactive than the group 1 metals, or those alkali metals. Okay. The third family we want to talk about is in columns 3 through 12. So this whole area is called the transition metals. Now, remember that these metals are all in the D block on the periodic table. So with our transition metals, okay, the things that you want to know. Okay, our transition metals are in group number 3 through 12. They have varying amounts of valence electrons. They can have multiple charges, okay, and they are less reactive than group 2. Okay, so the alkali metals in group 1 are the most reactive, and then the alkaline earth metals are a little less reactive, but still pretty good, and then the transition metals are even less reactive. Okay, so these are our transition metals. One thing to mention is that since the alkali metals are in column number 1, remember when we look at our electron configuration, the electron configuration will always end in S1. whereas your alkaline earth metals will always end in S2. And your transition metals are always going to end in, for the electron configuration, it will always end in D something. So 4D10, 3D6, whatever it is, it's always in the D block or D sublevel of the periodic table. Now, the next family that we care about the most is our halogens. So the halogens are right here, and they're in column number 17. Okay, so our halogens, which I'm actually going to make that pen a little bit bigger. So the halogens, they're in group number 17. Okay, they have 7 valence electrons, and they always have a -1 charge. The other thing that you need to know is that they are the most reactive of the non-metals. So column number 1, our alkali metals, are the most reactive metals, but our halogens are the most reactive of all of our non-metals. Okay, so those are our halogens. And I'm going to make this look a little bit better over here. Okay, and then our second to last group that we want to look at, let's use, what color do we want to use? Let's use pink. Okay, are going to be our noble gases. Okay, now our noble gases are in column 18. Okay, so as we look at the noble gases, we know that they're in group number 18. They mostly have 8 valence electrons except hydrogen, or excuse me, not hydrogen, except helium. Okay, it only has 2 valence electrons. Okay, and it will always have a neutral charge. Okay, these are always gases at room temperature. That's why we call them the noble gases. And they are the most stable. They're the most stable elements on the periodic table, which means that they do not react at all. All of the other elements are reactive. These are not. The only way they'll react is if like scientists force them in a experiment, but it takes very specific conditions for that to happen. So those are our noble gases. And then the last family that I want you guys to know about is our Lanthanides and Actinide series. So the Lanthanides are in this front row or top row of the F block, and the Actinides are down here. These are also sometimes called the inner transition metals, and that's because, remember, when we look at the periodic table, these elements actually go here. So they're called the inner transition metals because they belong inside the transition metals. Okay, so the lanthanide and actinide family, the main thing that you need to know is that they are in the F block of the periodic table, and they are mostly radioactive. Okay, so these are the elements where if you're like, hey, this thing is causing someone, like giving someone cancer, it's radioactive, we're going to use it to make a bomb, or, something like that. It's probably in this series. So for example, uranium is in here, okay, and we know uranium is used to make nuclear bombs, okay. So a lot of those sorts of things are in this series. So they're in the F block, and they're the most radioactive of our elements. And so this is the basics of the families that you need to know. And in our next video, we're going to talk all about metals versus nonmetals and metalloids to really get into even more of the chemical and physical properties of these elements.